Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear about current and future disease pressures and how the crop is progressing. We talk about fungicides and insecticides to think about when it comes to managing yield potential. Hear about a new 112-day PowerCore Enlist corn hybrid. And new for 2025, a brand new Hyper Early Soft Red winter wheat.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and Turk. And Ben, you've been out in the field. What's going on?
Yep, finally spent some time out in some cornfields doing a little bit of scouting and just, seeing what's out there for, what we're looking for disease, fungicides on a lot of guys' minds right now as corn's getting into that tassel stage. We have corn that's, hip high, and we have corn that's tasseled out and pollinating very nicely right now. So went out in some fields, and here locally, I could venture to bet everybody's got a little disease showing up in their corn right now, and everybody's asking that same question, how soon do I pull the trigger? How long can I wait? And some of the things that we did see when we were out in the field, we were seeing just a very, very, very small amount of tar spot, but we found it in every field that we looked. So just a lesion or two on a couple different plants out of a lot of walking. So it's out there. It's something that guys need to be scouting for and be aware of. I don't think it's huge at this point, but as we were talking about before screening, you see the lesions now, you go back in 2 weeks and see what you got. There's going to be more of them out there.
So in 2 weeks, it's going to tell the tale then, right?
Yep, we're going to see if what the researchers say that the hot, dry weather really slows that disease down. We're really going to know here in 2 weeks or not. So there's also a little bit of rust in the bottom leaves from what we were looking at, and we're also seeing some gray leaf spot too. So they've always talked about with tar spot, if that's the only disease that's out in the field, it may not be a huge yield limiting factor, but when it's in conjunction with other diseases like gray leaf spot or rust, that's when that plant really takes all of its energy out of the plant itself and throws it into the ear, and that's when we see yield loss and harvestability issues and things along those natures. So it's out there. Guys need to keep scouting it, and then you need to really make a decision on, is it going to be a 1 fungicide pass? Is it going to be a 2 fungicide pass type of year? And where we at with spending, the expensive fungicides versus the generics? There's an argument to be made both directions, I think, there when it comes to a fungicide. Do you spend the lesser amount of money on the cheap one to buy you to get you to that longer efficacy, towards that brown silk time frame, and then let that more expensive fungicide buy you time through? Or do you try to just get by with a 1-pass program at tassel with a more expensive and see where things are at in 4.5 weeks? So there's an argument to be made both sides, but there's some really, really good looking corn out there, and we got to remember that we really need to take care of it. So
yeah, when we look at the development of the yield from that standpoint, we look at all the curves. It's really important to not give up on the crop once we get to tassel, because that yield is made from that point on. So just don't think that you've quote unquote made it. There is still a lot of a weight to be added into that kernel. We could do some preservation of kernel count on the length from that standpoint. So it's very important to not give up on that and continue to scout, especially when we look. I did some traveling at the beginning of the week. Everyone's kind of in the same boat. You've got tassel and you've got knee high. You want to make sure that you're not giving up too early on the stuff that was planted a little bit later and not having any yield, because all that stuff potentially could be running into those same issues from a disease standpoint, because our GDUs are cooking along, and it's going to affect its timing earlier than what we have with the tassel or the tassel stuff right now. So the old thought was that sometimes the worst crop or a sick crop takes more energy to get to the finish line than a healthy crop. So if you want to have some yield preservation on this later planted stuff, you have to be really mindful of where you're at and look at micro applications, foliar applications potentially add some stuff to the tank mix on this fungicide if you have the option to do that, to make sure you get that one to the finish line. Because what I saw when in doing some scouting and some corn is, that later stuff, we've hit a critical period in the corn in conjunction with some wet conditions, and we're seeing some root lodging that's going on in some fields after some adverse weather effects. Kind of brand agnostic. I mean, we're seeing it just when you're in that V4 to V6 time frame, you have a lot of wet conditions after that corn was planted. We're just not getting the root development, getting a deep development of the roots to boot. Nodal roots are formed, but they're maybe 2.5 inches deep, and if you catch the weather event just at that growing time, they kind of basically pulls the root up out of the ground and lays that corn over. Now, the stuff that I looked at, we're kind of standing back up. It's doing its thing, but it's really important to not give up on that one either, because if you go out and look at it, you see it laying down, you want to make sure it's not green snap. With this one, like I said, it's standing back up. It's still pretty decent looking corn now that it stood back up. We're going to probably have a little bit of some harvestability issues when it comes to that. If you're spoiled and have your row sense on your combine, it's probably going to give you a few herk and jerks, but from a yield preservation, we want to make sure that we're still feeding that. There's a little bit of hail that came along with that, so back to our hail episode. If you guys haven't watched that, look at some information regarding the hail side of stuff, but the corn still looks good. I mean, it's developmentally behind the early stuff, but it's still a very, very, very cromulent crop that we got going on there.
Yeah. And have you seen any rootworm beetles out there, and what's your thoughts on putting in an insecticide with that fungicide?
With the cost of already going out with your fungicide, most guys, I do recommend to go ahead and put the insecticide in. And yes, there are rootworm beetles flying out there. We've got them in corn fields. We got them in rotated fields.
They're in waterways right now.
Yeah, so there's definitely rootworm out there, and the beetle bomb, trying to reduce numbers for next year, is always something that I would suggest to growers.
Okay.
This new 112-day PowerCore hybrid, we only had a few hundred units that we put out this year, but we're getting a lot of feedback on that one, aren't we?
Yes. One of our growers out west said, and I don't know how big his fingers are, but one of our growers out west said that it takes 7 fingers to cover what that leaf area of that product is. And he's really excited about that, because some of his favorite hybrids coming out of the Corteva program are really wide-leafed corn products. So it's a big solar panel to collect as much energy as you possibly can. There's products out there from a couple different producers that talk about, if you put this growth regulator on, or if you put this biostimulant on, you can add another 1/2 inch to your leaf width on your corn. So our product, like our 112-day, like what Joe was talking about, it's a phenomenal looking product. It looks really good in a lot of the test plots. We're really excited about it for next year.
And you're going to have it available as a conventional and as a PowerCore.
Yep.
For $25.
Yes. Very, very strong product.
So that big solar panel, fungicide, Ben?
For the 112-day, it would be kind of classified more towards that racy side of things. It does have, it's not quite as bulletproof from a disease standpoint, so yes, I am fungiciding the 112-day. It still has a very good disease package associated with it, but it's going to be one of those products that the more money you put into that crop, the more money you're going to get out of that crop. Yep.
A lot of the wheat's off, at least in our local area and in many areas, and it's been a phenomenal wheat year, hasn't it? I mean, I know one grower that last year was his first year growing wheat in many, many years. He averaged right at 100. This year, 117, and he had test weights above 60. I mean, what are you hearing?
Yep, I got another grower that I've actually had 2 growers that I've talked to the past week that this is their first year raising wheat in probably 20 years, and they were both over 100 bushel per acre. I think the one was 116, and I think the other one was 130 bushel per acre. The 130 was over in central Illinois. The 116 was a local farmer here too. But just, it's definitely got guys scratching their head and thinking, maybe I do need to be putting wheat back into the rotation.
And they got their double crop beans in before the rains came, and so that has a excellent potential too. But we're just hearing good wheat yields all the way from northern Illinois all the way south, and even though in the southern Illinois area, they had a lot of moisture, but they still held their yields quite well.
Yep, very respectable yields coming out of southern Illinois. They had a little bit lighter test weight because when that crop was ready to harvest, they had 4, 5, 6 inches of rain on it, and they stayed wet for 2 to 3 weeks that they didn't want to. But yeah, still a lot of 80s, 90s, 100s in that region of the world.
I think the cool part too this year with some of the wheat, November planted wheat, that what we would typically think, with wheat related to a little bit of the corn properties, if you get a little bit later in the year, it compensates, you take away from that top end yield. November planted wheat still cranking in, upper 90s to 100. That's phenomenal to be able to have that window to get your soybean, a decent, because like some of them are putting in soybeans, wheat, soybeans, they're getting a moderately full season soybean coming into that, and then able to put that wheat behind it. Now, yes, they are taking in away some of that top end, but to be able to go in a bean, wheat bean, wheat bean, wheat bean, and crank that kind of yield and be able to extend that maturity out a little bit on the backside to take advantage of some September rain, that's pretty good.
And our hyper early, which is a new category, you're not going to hear hyper early from any other seed company but Merschman Seeds. It's a term that we actually trademarked, so it's our term, and to represent the varieties that we have under our production this year on some of the land that our sister company, Merschman Fertilizer, owns, that we're farming, and we had great yields too. I mean, for those things that came off so early, and we still were pushing 100 bushel wheat. So that's another positive, So this year we got probably the most extensive maturity options on wheat and variety options that we've ever had as long as we've been in business.
Yes.
What would you say that was about? Average between all the hyper earlies, about 5 days ahead of what our ultra earlies came off as?
I would say a very conservative 2 to 3. But yes, if you look at what the data originators give us, they were saying 5 to 7 earlier than our ultra earlies that we were running now. I think they were being a little bit on the far side of things, but it's a very solid 2 to 3 days ahead. So step changes.
Yep, very good. Turk, do you have anything for us this morning?
The kind of the same thing. Don't forget about these markets. They're in the dump because of the USDA reports come out. 3 million more bushels or acres of soybeans and 3 million less of corn than a year ago, but still more than the March 1st was forecast on corn. And so the markets kind of took a dive, but they're kind of holding in there, and they've been holding in there at some resistance levels on the downside. And so maybe with all the rains and the continued flooding that we're continuing to have, we're losing acres and we're continuing to lose fertilizer and wet spots out in the field. And I think there's going to be, people have some surprises come fall that are probably not in the market. And so I guess what I'm saying is there could be some opportunities coming to market grain that you haven't got sold yet, and if you have to move that grain before harvest, it's time to do it.
Yeah, I had read that most of the summer rallies start after July 10th. So, and then of course, I don't know how the USDA factors in all this damage in Minnesota, Northwest Iowa, South Dakota. There's some saying 2 million acres of crop loss, and if that's been factored in, it probably factored into the markets, who knows. But, the crop's not made, and normally the government overestimates crops in a wet year. So that's traditional, but there's always that 1 or 2 out years that it doesn't follow the norm.
We never know what the government's going to do to us.
I always say that farmers, the easy part in some ways is producing it. The hardest part is marketing it.
I think the most important thing is, like Ben has always said, is get out there in your fields and look and scout your fields and know what you got before the combine gets there. That's going to be very important this year. Yeah. Get up with a drone or an airplane and fly around and look at stuff.
Yep. See where your wet holes are and what percentage they are and what it's going to cost you. And obviously check the neighbors out too while you're up there, right?
Yep.
Well, anyhow, hope everybody had a great July 4th and enjoyed the day off. Hopefully you got the day off. I know it's always nice to get together with family. My jokes today, I have 3 of them, and we'll see what you think. I keep trying, guys. I keep trying. Okay, my friends keeps telling me, cheer up, man. it could be worse. You could be stuck underground in a hole full of water. I know he means well. Okay, all right, I got a smile. That's a good start. You know, speaking of Minnesota, you know, I tried to order a large Diet Coke up there when I was up there the other day traveling, and they wouldn't give me one. They would only give me mini sodas.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Maybe that's why they call it soda up there.
That's right. All right, got one more. The pessimist sees a tunnel. The optimist sees a light at the end of the tunnel. The realist sees a train. And the train engineer sees 3 idiots on the railway track. There you go.
Yep.
Well, thanks for watching this week. We hope your family is healthy and safe, and we hope your crop's off to a good start. And hopefully these markets will reward farmers for all their hard work soon, and we'll see you next week. Take care.